Hello, friends, and welcome to our 43rd podcast. It's great having you with us today as we will be finishing the Gospel of John today, and we hope that you have been enjoying, again, continuing to enjoy these as we get through these and through the New Testament, and it doesn't seem much longer before we'll be thinking, "Wow, it's been a year." We go through them, but we do enjoy this time and with you. And today we'll pick up a little where we left off last time, which I think when we were talking, it was a little bit about the Good Shepherd, and in John's story where he's talking about Jesus claiming, himself says that right before it, to get into it, right before it, he assures you that he's the gate for the sheep. And then he says, "And all who comes before me were thieves and outlaws, but the sheep didn't listen. He's the gate that whoever enters through him." And then after he says that he's the gate who goes, he says that he's the shepherd who leads the sheep through there. And so, and then he says that when that hired hand sees the wolf coming, he leaves the sheep and runs away. But that's because the sheep aren't really his, is how he says it. And he says, it's part of the whole situation. I remember, they say as we talked about sheep before, and how they're not really smart, in the incidents,
downright dumb.
And as we go through them, you remember these are the ones who they're used to a voice, and it says, they hear my voice, they know who I am. And it's a lot of times when those sheep are led by a shepherd, they know the distinct voice of that one. It's almost like your pet, that you have. Your pet gets used to hearing the same voice from you, and knows who you are. And when someone strange comes, they'll do whatever. But yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Even now in the Middle East, when groups of shepherds come together and their flocks mingle, each of them has a distinct whistle that identifies, and the sheep will go to the various shepherds and divide themselves back out.
Very cool. Very cool. I think one of the parts I liked in this particular one is, when he says he's the good shepherd, he knows his sheep and they know me. Then he says, I give up my life for the sheep. But then he says, I have other sheep that don't belong to this sheep pen, but I have to lead them too. And they will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock with one shepherd. And that was really that sign of, it's not just the Jews now. I mean, again, that situation that there's others that are going to be involved and others that he's going to be leading. And that was just, it just was something that I really found.
Interestingly enough, that particular verse is one that our Latter-day Saints friends point to. They, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons as they are known, believe that the 10 lost tribes of Israel came across the land bridge, settled in North America, and expanded, had a wonderful culture here in North America, and that Jesus appeared to them, the former day saints, as they are known, appeared to the former day saints, and they believed, and they point to this particular verse as a sign that Jesus came to those former day saints. Nice. I don't particularly take it that way, but if some of our listeners happen to have Mormon friends, they may have heard that, that when Jesus speaks of sheep that do not belong to this sheepfold, that he was talking about those former day saints.
Absolutely. So as we go on, it's I think going into a lot of the scripture with Lazarus fallen ill, and how he's there. He has and we know his sisters Martha and Mary. And as we go through, and he gets word that Lazarus is ill, and basically, in his
Stays.
ways, yes,
Stays where he is.
he just stays. Yeah, and it's like one of those things. I think it's 4 days. And you just he looks to the disciples. The disciples are kind of confused, because he's like, well, if he's not, if he's just sleeping, what's the big deal? Why do you have to do it? It was more of helping them understand to see it. And as he says, this is going to be done so you can see God glorified, basically, in that sense of the reason why they waited till they could get there.
And I think that that portion of this story is a reminder of that truism of John 5:19. I can do nothing except that which I see the Father doing first. That's a very hard thing for us to live into.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if either one of us received word that the other was sick, we would drop what we were doing and go.
You do what you go. Yeah, that's how we do.
Yeah. And yet, Jesus apparently did not feel a release to do that, right. Whether he wanted to or not. The scriptures don't tell us.
Right.
But he didn't do it. He stayed because somehow or other, in that moment, that was what needed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's what he does. He says, because even they say, and he just says, Jesus tells them plainly, Lazarus died, but for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there so that you can believe. Let's go to him. And then he goes. And, and the disciples, are even there. Even Thomas is like, well, let's go too so that we may die with Jesus. I mean, so like they are so things because they think he's going back there. They know that if they go back there, those people there don't want Jesus there. They basically are going for his life. And so Thomas is like, he thinks they're going to battle, they're going somewhere to do something. We're just going there and we're going to die with you, Jesus.
Which is worth holding on to. Yes. when we get to the later story, the more famous story of Thomas, doubting Thomas as he is known.
Yeah.
He certainly exhibits great faith in other ways. And yet is always known simply for that one moment.
Thing. Yes.
And
and
who wouldn't have?
Exactly. I mean, and so we see the responses from Martha and Mary. Martha, of course, goes out first and talks to Jesus, and both kind of say the same message. If you'd been here, our brother wouldn't have died, and Martha gets the message, which is, more about the resurrection, Jesus talking to her. Do you believe? She goes, yes, I know my brother's going to rise and he's going to come back at the resurrection. And but it's the opposite, for, Mary doesn't get that. When Mary approaches him, it's not like that. She falls at his feet, basically says the same thing. And Jesus at this point sees her crying and others crying. And then, a lot of scriptures, as we know, say Jesus wept, at this point because he sees the crying, but it's the difference of how he reacts to Martha compared to Mary. And we all know the story in whichever other gospel it is, where, and you wonder, Luke, where Martha's so busy preparing and Mary is sitting at his feet. But it was almost like you would have thought it would have been different because Martha really received the scripture from Jesus and John, and Mary didn't. Mary just received his affection, kind of, in a way. So it was just a different way to look at it, I think, in the aspect. But anyway, he goes by and he goes back to the tomb, and, of course, they call him out. They say, like, it's gonna stink. He's been dead for 4 days. Like, don't do it. But he's still.
One of the key things I think to hold on to in this story is that whatever happened to Lazarus, however you want to understand that, is not the resurrection.
Right.
somehow or other, he comes back. He is raised from the tomb. My translation in verse 44 says, the dead man came out. Not the formerly dead man, not the now healed dead man, the dead man.
Yeah, that's what mine says. The dead man came out.
And there, there is reason to hold on to this story that Lazarus was still just as dead physically as he was in the tomb, and that as you all listening may remember, some time ago I talked about the story of the anointing of Mary anointing Jesus in chapter 12, and the contrast of smells. There's reason to believe that Lazarus still smelled dead, that he still looked like a corpse, because he wasn't raised. He didn't. I mean, he wasn't resurrected. He was raised.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it is like right after this where it said that, but even when you said it said when he goes back to their house again after first you go out here, and I guess before we jump too far, you hear this and the crowd sees it and they go back and tell the chief priest and the Pharisees and all these things what's going on, and of course Caiaphas is known in this thing. Which is when he says, you realize that it's better for one man to die for the people rather than a whole nation to be destroyed. And so he's kind of talking to them like, just wait, the time will come that they'll do that. And then he goes back to, later on they go back, the Passover begins, he goes back to Bethany again, which is where, again, to the house of Lazarus and Mother Mary, and as you said, Mary anoints his feet. But, it says Martha served, and Lazarus was among those who joined him at the table. So it's like he was there. People have been getting word around. Jesus anoints his feet. People complain. Judas, in this particular place, complains that the money could have been used for the poor. And then this is where you hear in this aspect that he said this because he didn't care for the poor, but because he was a thief and he carried the money bag and would take money from it. But then Jesus just says to leave her alone, that she has been doing this in preparation for his burial. And then he says, many Jews learned that he was there. They came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he'd raised from the dead. The chief priests decided they would kill Lazarus too, because it was because of him. They were blaming Lazarus because of him that people were basically not following the religious authorities because of what happened. Yes.
Well, then we move to the entrance to Jerusalem and the beginning of Holy Week. One of the most interesting things to me about the Gospel of John and the entrance into Jerusalem is that the Gospel of John is the only one of the four Gospels that refers to palm branches. All the other Gospels talk about branches, but the branches could have been almond trees or anything else. Only John refers to palm branches, and yet that's the central image for us of that moment. It wasn't a Sunday; it was probably a Tuesday, but when he enters, and then John's description of the last night together is very, very different than the other three Gospels.
Yep.
It's not a Passover meal.
Right.
It's a pre-Passover meal. There's no taking of the bread, breaking it, and giving it to the disciples. There's no giving of the cup.
Right.
The metaphor is the washing of the disciples' feet.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the sacrament, if you will, from John. And I think it's intriguing and telling of Christianity that we for millennia have been so uncomfortable with this notion of washing another's
Mm.
feet that we completely ignore that Jesus gives the same command about washing of feet as he does about Holy Communion. Jesus says, uh, what I have set an example for you. Um, uh, what I have done, you should do also.
Yep. Yep.
In verse 13, you call me teacher and master, and you are right. That is what I am. Well then, if I, as your master and teacher, washed your feet just now, you should wash one another's feet. I've given you a pattern so that you can do things in the same way that I did to you.
Yeah.
It's kind of close to a command.
Absolutely.
And yet we're like, yeah, well, that seems like it would be uncomfortable.
Yeah. 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 And even to some people it is. The very thing is. But yes, you're right. In all these things we do, and he talks about this part here, he talks about the one who's going to betray him. Um, and even in this aspect, as in verse 26, he said, well, first they say about this, and Peter is trying to get we assume it's John. It says the disciple who Jesus loved. He's basically getting his attention, and he's like leaning back toward. He says, like, Lord, who is it? Like, they want to know who is the one that's going to do it. And Jesus says, it's the one to whom I will give this piece of bread of whom I dipped into the bowl. And he hands the piece of bread and gives it to Judas. And then of course Judas, goes off, and he says, what you are to do quickly. And he goes off and into this part. But like you said, it's not the same as the others written. It's just a different thing because they don't do like that. Just not
Holy
the taking
Communion.
and the breaking and the sharing
Right.
and all that stuff. It's
Right.
not like that. But then he gives them, after this, he gives them command. But he did in this aspect. It caught my attention that in verse 31, I think I said it's 31, 33, he said, when Judas was gone, Jesus said, now the human one has been glorified and God has been glorified. And if God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify the human one. And then he says, I give you this new command to love each other just as I have loved you. So you also must love each other. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other. So he's told him about basically, as I have washed your feet, you should wash others. Now he's saying, as I loved you, you should love others. And it gets to this point where he just, the disciples are confused and they're not sure, like, of what's going on, because Peter's like, well, where are you going? Like, where are you going to do? And he's like, where I'm going, you can't. And Peter's like, why can't I follow you? I'll give up my life for you. And Jesus like, no, no,
Not yet.
not you won't. No, you won't. You'll deny me 3 times before the rooster crows.
Well, and absolutely, interestingly enough, a lot of the details from that point forward are the same in all 4 Gospels.
Yeah.
The arrest, all 4 Gospels have the high priest. Only John gives the name.
The name.
But all 4 have an ear cut off of the high priest's guard. Yeah. All 4 of them have them out in the garden. All 4 of them have a lot of those same details. The same details. I suspect that Jesus's word to Peter was less about the denial that was to come than to say there are other things to come in your life. John seems to have this sense that what we are supposed to do is just, if you will, float along on the river of the will of God.
Yeah.
And that's as true for Jesus as it is for Peter, as it is for Judas, as it is for you and for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, of course, we go through this. I mean, he talks about the way, the truth, the life. He talks about being the true vine. He again talks about loving each other. And I mean, he talks about how the world is going to hate them. He's, if the world hates you, know that it hated me first. And just, he says, remember that I told you, servants aren't greater than their master. If the world harassed me, it will harass you too. If it kept my word, it will also keep yours. The world will do all these things to you on account of my name, because it doesn't know the one who sent me. So it goes through these situations. It goes through as they go, as they get ready to go into the things he's having. Basically, his conversations, and then 17, he prays, and probably one of the most, I don't know the right word to say, but it's amazing prayers, because he's not praying. He begins praying to God and praying for the disciples, but then he also prays basically for us, for those who will follow
believe through your word.
Yeah, and so it's like he's lifting everybody up into that point of time.
And I think that it's telling that what the prayer is for us to stay together.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that requires us to have an organizational union of, all the churches in the entire world organized under a single leader and all having the exact same worship patterns and preaching the exact same sermons. I think that some of that diversity is good for us. I think the tragedy is how easily we as Christians can speak ill of one another. How easily we can break apart. You think of the church fights that have happened over some of the silliest of things.
Yeah.
I remember in Durham, was out for a bike ride, and two churches literally across the street from one another. One was the Jerusalem church, and the other was the New Jerusalem church. Or I don't actually remember the name, but one was X church, the other was the New X.
Yeah.
And you have to think that someplace or other there was a fight within that church, and it probably was something as crucial as the color of the carpet in the sanctuary, and suddenly they've broken apart. And the rest of the world looks at that and just shakes its head. How is it we have gone from a new commandment, love one another as I have loved you, by this will all people know that you are my disciples, to we're going to fight over whether there should be a comma in the middle of a paragraph.
It is crazy. And yeah, like I said, in all this, it's like Jesus is basically like, he just wants them to be one as he and the Father are one. It's like that's togetherness. Of course, we know after this they go into the garden and the rest. I think what is unique about this is, in my version at least, it says when they ask who they're looking for, and Jesus says Jesus, then as they say Jesus the Nazarene, and Jesus says, I am. And and it says when he said I am, they shrank back and fell to the ground. And he asked them again, who are you looking for? And they said, and he said, I told you, I am. If you're looking for me, then let these people go. But it was amazing because they knew, it's like these authorities knew someone claiming to be I am was, that was like God speaking to them. So that was something like they feared. Like if this is God speaking to me, they were crunching, they were doing anything they can to be like, to
Hiding
protect her, to
away.
hiding. Yes,
Sure.
yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and the trial before Pilate
Mm-hmm.
is
A
different
little different. Yeah.
in the Gospel of John. There's all sorts of back and forthness.
Mm-hmm.
John includes the iconic phrase in chapter 19 in Latin, "Ecce homo," behold the man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and every time I read that, I think to myself of in Hebrews chapter 12, it talks about looking to Jesus, who for the glory set before him endured the cross, despising its shame. And I think, I mean, if I were in that position and Pilate said, "Behold the man," I absolutely would. Behold the man.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see the man? I'll show you. And and yet that's not the story.
Right. Right.
That's not our understanding of life.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
in the Gospel of John, we mentioned that the Last Supper was not the Passover. In the Gospel of John, Jesus is crucified at the moment that the lambs are being sacrificed in the temple for Passover.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
John is the one that tells the beautiful story of uh, John the disciple
Yeah.
and
Mary.
Mary. Behold your woman, behold your son, behold your mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. He does going through all that. Yeah, absolutely. And then of course we go this, you see as he's going through this again, it mentions about the breaking of legs and everything like that, and John includes that part in here. But and how they didn't do his, but then he's in this version, you also is Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate to take the body away. We also see Nicodemus is present with him in this aspect, and so it's one of the things where you can almost see that Nicodemus is almost seems like he has become a follower in that aspect, because by now, if he's not concerned about going up there, then he's not concerned about being judged of whether he's helping somebody take Jesus' body down. It's almost like he's something has happened to him in his transformation to be able to help them uh, to do that part. And then of course, and we have the resurrection, the Mary, how Mary goes to the tomb this time, and the stone's taken away, and she runs and tells Peter and the other disciple. They run back, and then Mary's left by herself again, and it's just like Jesus and Mary in for this moment in that aspect.
well, you know that Austin Miles, the hymn writer, um, says that this was the. Well, I mean, this clearly is the story, and he says that it was in prayerful reflection on this story that the hymn "In the
Garden.
Garden" was given to
Given.
him whole cloth.
Mm.
That he was in prayer, he was reflecting on that portion of this story,
Mm-hmm.
and when he finished his time, he just wrote without the manuscript that is
Mm.
preserved
Yeah.
has no crossouts,
Mm.
no that it's just a single stream of
Yeah.
consciousness. In Jesus's appearance to the disciples in chapter 20, verse 23, um, Jesus gives to the disciples and to the church this authority of forgiving sins.
Yeah.
If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of anyone, they are retained. Massive power that the church rarely takes hold of, and maybe should be more serious about.
Go through, yes.
If you ask me.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, we draw to a close this week, and I guess I would have us end exactly the place that the gospel ends. The very end of the Gospel of John says there are many other things which Jesus did. If they were written down one by one, I don't think the world itself would be able to contain the books that would be written.
Yeah, into that.
We turn now to beginning to talk about the life of the disciples, the story of the church, and living this life of faith. We look forward to talking to you next week, and hope that you continue studying the Word.
Yes. Have a great day.